that's all I have for my report. So now I'll give a little introduction for our program here, and then we can host some sunflower plant workers up here to share some of their stories. So, of course, not everyone watching online or in here necessarily knows the history of the sunflower plant, especially if you're younger, considering that the plant closed 31 years ago. So I wanted to give just a very basic overview of the plant and how it relates to Eudora. And then, of course, after my overview, we'll turn the program over to the various speakers. And these speakers will talk about their connections to the sunflower plant. We hosted a very similar program to this last year in July of 2022. And it was such a successful program that we decided to do it again, namely because we didn't have the opportunity for everyone to get up and share. So we're hopeful that people that were here last year that didn't get a chance to speak will be able to speak this year. Of course, the sunflower plant has had a profound influence on the history of the Eudora area. Eudora was founded by German immigrants in 1857, and by 1940, the overwhelming majority of Eudora area residents were still German immigrants and/or their descendants. In 1940, when the plant, just before the plant opened, Eudora had a population of 713. Of course, all that changed. In December of 1941, when the U.S. found itself at war with Japan, Italy, and Germany, they realized that they had to revamp America's industry to focus on wartime production. And the U.S. and its allies needed huge plants to make enough powder and propellants to win the war. It was quickly decided that a powder plant would be built here in northeast Kansas. The site selected for the plant was, of course, just south of DeSoto and just 3 miles east of Eudora. The government bought out the farms, homes, and businesses of hundreds of people to make room for the plant. The Eudora area community of Prairie Center was unfortunately completely demolished in order to make room for the plant. Even though it no longer exists, we still consider Prairie Center part of the Eudora area. Construction on the plant started in 1942. It opened in 1943, 80 years ago, and it was operated by Hercules Powder. It employed over 12,000 people during World War II. It was the world's largest smokeless powder plant. During World War II, the sunflower plant produced more than 200 million pounds of propellants. The powder and propellants made at the sunflower plant were not only used by U.S. armed forces, they were also used by America's wartime allies, particularly the Soviet Union. The powder and propellants made at the sunflower plant were crucial to the Allied victory over Germany, Japan, and Italy in World War II. The population of Eudora more than doubled after the opening of the plant. Many of the plant's workers and their families moved to Eudora. As a result, Eudora faced an extreme housing shortage. The sunflower plant and their families lived wherever they could find shelter. Some plant workers and their families lived in garages, chicken coops, basements, attics, and even tents. Eudora's resources were stretched to their limits in the early 1940s. However, the city of Eudora and Eudora area residents quickly adapted to the influx of people. And of course, many of the sunflower plant workers and their families stayed in Eudora after the plant went into standby after the war ended. After World War II, the sunflower plant typically became operational during subsequent U.S. conflicts, i.e. the Korean War and the Vietnam War. Production at the plant ceased permanently in 1992. Since 1992, there's been a massive cleanup effort at the plant. Last year, of course, we learned what the future holds for the site of the former plant. Last year, Kansas government officials announced that the site of the former sunflower plant will be redeveloped into the Panasonic Energy electric vehicle battery plant, which could employ up to 4,000 people. I guess 11 years ago in 2012, the Historical Society, we were invited out to what remains of the sunflower plant, and they were nice enough to give us quite a bit of artifacts and archives relating to the plant. So we have quite an extensive collection of sunflower plant artifacts and archives at our museum, which of course the public is welcome to see. That really concludes the overview of the history of the plant, and now I'd like to move on to the main part of our program, which is to invite as many former sunflower plant employees and or people who have a connection to the plant to come up here to the podium and share their stories with us, because we want to document your stories for future generations. In order to share stories and or the history relating to the plant, I will ask that you please stand here at the podium and not move around, because we are filming the program for posterity, and it's also being live streamed on our Facebook page. If you wish, we do have a kind of a microphone system set up here. Pretty small time, but it does work, I think. So I'll go ahead and turn this on. In theory,
voice amplifier.
And in theory, it should start to work. So feel free to use this if you don't want to yell. I guess we'll turn it off in between, and when you come up here, you turn it on, so that way we don't hear that feedback every time. My apologies. So yeah, if you want to come up here, I just ask that you please give your name and try to limit your remarks to 10 minutes so we can try to have as many people speak. And of course, if you were nice enough to present last year, we ask that you please allow people that didn't present last year. If we have time, you can come back up here. But those are really all the rules that I ask. And of course, if anyone has photos, feel free to share. If you have questions for your speaker, please ask them when they're still up here so they don't have to come sit down and come back up. And that's all I have. Who would like to go first? Please come on up.
I'm Bob Bartholomew. I used to live at Sunflower Village and work at Hercules. We moved in Sunflower Village in 1943. We were some of the first people that moved in there.
Microphone, please.
Okay.
Oh, here, let me turn it on for you.
Okay.
Just a minute.
Voice amplifier.
Okay, there you go. Go ahead.
Okay. Like I said, we were some of the first people to move in Sunflower Village. My dad worked there before we moved in, and we were some of the very first people living in Sunflower Village, and he worked at Hercules, and so did I later on. I want to correct a few things that I read before and was mentioned here last time, and they did, pardon me, they didn't know about Sunflower Village. I read some of the things that were said, and they weren't all quite correct. Sunflower was 3 different villages: Sunflower Old Village, New Village, and Sailor Village. The school was not built at that time. We had 2 temporary buildings near where the theater was, and the church is out there now. So they were just temporary buildings until the school got built. But they were very nice schools, really, really great. My mom worked there as a kindergarten teacher and as a first grade teacher. So I have a picture here of the 3 different villages. The big one on the left is Sunflower Village, Old Village. The middle one is the New Village, and the Sailor Village is the small one on the right-hand side. This was to help families who were working at Olathe Air Base, and they lived there, and it was one of the first part of the village that disappeared. The New Village has disappeared now. Old Village is still there. And I want to correct some of the things that I read.
Move this away from the, probably not give so much feedback.
Okay. Some of the things that I read about and were mentioned the last time, Sunflower Village did not have a refrigerator in the whole place that I know. In fact, I carried ice one summer before I was old enough to join the plant. And so that's one thing I read before and they talked about last time. They did not have refrigerators, and they did not have wood stoves. They were coal. In the middle of the winter, you could hardly walk through there without coughing. Very polluted. And so after I got to be 18 years old, out of high school, I went to work with the water department at Sunflower Village, at Hercules Powder Plant. I was in the water department, worked at several places, including the river intake. I'm sure a lot of you folks remember the '51 flood. I rode to work in a pickup truck rode out in a motorboat. They came up that fast, and you couldn't get from DeSoto or Sunflower, you couldn't get out of the place unless you went through the plant. So they had a guard car leading the people down to the south gate, and they had another guard car following to make sure no one veered off to the side, and it was quite an ordeal. I think that's about all I have to say. I have a picture here which we can pass. I have a picture which we can pass around Sunflower Village.
I think if we hold it like this, there probably won't be any feedback. So if you want to come up here and speak directly into the microphone, I think probably everyone could hear. Who would like to go next?
I'm right here.
Okay.
My name is Darrell Zimmerman, and I never miss an opportunity to talk. Also, I forget things too. But you notice I have a special T-shirt on. And the gentleman sitting by me here, he's the one that designed it. And we want to offer those for sale to the members. I think that he ordered 50 some time ago, and he said that they went really fast, $25 a piece. Now, he really doesn't have that much money in them, because he was, making a profit from it. So if we use the $25 price on them, though, anything above the actual cost of the shirts and the printing, we'll donate it back to the Historical Society. I did want to say that I did work at Sunflower, not in the powder plant. There were two fellows named Niall, two brothers, and they did custom baling. And I worked with them one summer. It's the only time I ever saw a stack of square bales that contained 5,000 bales of hay. They had all kinds of cattle and rodeo stock and a lot of livestock out there. So I think that's probably my story. See,
Oh, thank you.
it's much quicker this time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Darrell. Who would like to go next? All right, thank you.
My name's Dean Stark. I was a lineman at Sunflower for 29 years. I'm like Bartholomew. We moved to Sunflower Village in 1943 when there was only 5 lanes. My dad helped build the plant, worked there 15 years. He was gone. I was in the Marine Corps a little bit. I came back and then I was there 29 years. But Sunflower was an interesting place because, like they said, it was the largest powder plant in the world, and we made a lot of rocket powder for Vietnam. So that's about all I have to say. I had a good time. It was a great place to work and made a good living.
Who would like to go next? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Richard Messer. I was an inside electrician for 15 years at Sunflower from September of '79 to August of '94. 15 years in one place. That was the longest job I ever held in my life. And I was hoping to get another 15 years in to get my retirement. Dean, you look so different now without your curls that I remember.
I had a big beard too, and it was dark.
That too. And I remember Jerry Mason and
Clifford Dean.
pardon?
Clifford Dean.
Clifford Dean and
Porky.
The line crew. We worked together so much, especially on the Saturday of Memorial Weekend when we had to go through all the switch houses, pull all the breakers out, clean them up, check them out, and make sure they tested properly. When I got there, I never realized how big the place was. 15.5 square miles of a federal reservation. 15.5 square miles of the most wildlife I've ever seen in one place. Deer, turkeys, bobcats, pheasants, turtle doves, you name it, it was there. And it was always something to see when you drive around and look at everything. I worked at that place from one end to the other, north, south, east, west. I had my fill of nitroguanidine. I've had my fill of working at all the different buildings, powerhouses, doing all the repair works, and making sure that everything was in operational order in the event that it was called back to operation. And I do not regret having not been there. Thank you.
Thank you. Who'd like to go next? No one else?
Bashful.
Yeah.
No. I'm just here.
Did anyone work at the plant? That hasn't spoken? All right, thank you.
Hi, Greg Nice. I only spent 5 years out at Sunflower, but I was in the security department from 1985 to 1990. So, how many people still remember their badge number? 75241. That was the securities. All started with 75. Then production was, if I remember right, were just 4 numbers. S, and then the people worked up front all had S badge numbers. So, but anyway, like you said, going around the inside perimeter, we had 2 patrols. Patrol 2 went around the east side. Patrol 3 went around the west side. If we were lucky enough to have full staff of guards on, we had a Patrol 4 that just continually went around the outer perimeter. Patrol 1 did the admin area, plus then we went out front and we went to all the well houses on this side of the river and on the other side. 8 pumping stations on each side.
Okay.
And then river intake, we'd go down to river intake and take a look at that, and we never really had access to the old river intake treatment plant, 123, so. But it was really interesting working out there. I remember Carl Spellman and Sam Smith, and certain nights you could tell if it was going to rain, you could tell if it was going to be a heavy rain, you'd see the copperheads crossing the blacktop. And then Sam always wanted to keep, how many copperheads did you run over tonight? And, but like I said, we saw just about every kind of wildlife out there. And my boss, Lieutenant Roth, he had a very good story of seeing a cougar out there back in the late 60s, because he said the thing jumped from the East Patrol Road to the security fence in the corner up there by ballistics and sat on the corner post and swished its tail at him, so he knew it wasn't a bobcat, and then went over.
We had two inside electricians that had one jump over and going in an abandoned building, jumped over and getting out of the building.
Yeah. And I don't remember, I think it was Jerry Clayton, when he was working as a carpenter the first time, before he came to security, was in one of the old alcohol producing plants over by nitroguanidine, and went up in one of those 2-story buildings, got up to the top of it, and there was a bobcat in the top of it, and he said it was a race to see who got to the bottom, and the bobcat won. He scared it worse than it scared him. So, yeah, it was a very interesting place to work. Met a lot of people out there, and still see a lot of people that I knew that worked out there.
Did you have a lot of trespassers out there?
We had a couple
Yeah.
when I was working there, and we caught a couple of teenagers that broke in and were vandalizing the Robert Lake house.
I was gonna ask you about that lake. It was there before they built the plant, right?
Yeah,
And that building
Did
with,
a lawyer live there? His name
it was
Robert?
Dr. Roberts
Yeah.
built a stone house out there, a really nice house. It was my understanding they left it, and then during the 40s, the Army, a lot of the Army officers used it as kind of a party place. But the lake had some really nice fish in it. For some of the people that snuck in there and got fish out of it, I know, because it was only less than 50 yards inside the fence. You could crawl the fence and get in there. You usually hear a car coming up the patrol road, if not. So yeah, it was fun and it was interesting. And my father-in-law, Glenn Long, worked out there as a carpenter. A lot of you remember Glenn. So he's still doing good. I forgot to tell him about tonight. So he's probably about this time getting ready for bed. So.
Thank you very much. Who's next?
I worked out there for a couple of years. My job was, I worked out at the acids lab. My wife was constantly rough. Every time I'd wear a new pair of jeans, it lasted about 1 week or something like that. So, but it was an interesting place. I got to go around the facility, most of it because I was picking up acid samples all around the plant. So it was a fun place to work. I got to. She said, "Tell you that my dad worked there too." So.
Thank you.
My name's Bob Rice. I worked out here at somewhere 66, March of 66 until September of 70. I worked down in the nitro cotton area where the whole operation of making powder started in this nitro cotton area. And it was a wonderful place to work at the time. When I left, I'm glad I left and got out there. And that's all I have to say. What's that?
I think that was one of the hardest ones to work.
Oh, Yeah, oh, yes, you can get to wear wool clothing. Oh, yeah, bet.
That was hard work, night to God.
I just wanted to say publicly, I started in 1965 out there in the acid area. Worked through acid, nitrocotton, paste, nitroglycerin. Ended up being trained by the Army to be the unexploded ordnance officer out there. So I was then authorized to clean up propellants and things and burn the buildings. I burned all that smoke you might have seen from here. I burned 1,400 of the 1,900 and some buildings that were burned out there. I worked there, I'm longer than anyone else has worked there. I worked there until 2 years ago, the end of May. I worked there 56 years. And just cleaning up propellants and things for the last many years. I couldn't hardly leave the place. I worked till I was 83 because I absolutely loved the place. It was one of the most interesting, of course, I had one of the most interesting jobs, cleaning up the propellants, disposing of all the buildings and things, so it was hard to leave. But I miss it yet to this day, but I've been gone. But enjoyed it much. It was a great place to work.
You remember we were down at Five Corners, up in the air, working on a line. And when they first started that, one of the buildings blew up and blew crap past us on the Five Corners.
Yeah, the expander blew up down there. The cooling is a Barksdale pressure switch that allowed steam to go into cooling to the bearings of the expander. And that Barksdale pressure switch failed.
We never knew that, we just knew some shingles and stuff went by.
Is that right?
Yeah.
It burned, it was more, the expander was going, it was going 5,000 and some, correct? The expander, 5,000 RPM when it went. So when it was a turbine expander, had turbine blades in it. So when the bearings went, those turbine blades disintegrated. It broke the bolts out of that held the top of the expander onto the bottom. And they were 1 inch, 1.25 inch bolts. It even broke those and exposed the whole expander. But that's about the extent of the damage, except for fire on the building itself.
We were just fairly close and didn't know that it was going.
Yeah, I was in the building, and the Charlie Canes had told me, hey, it's vibrating real bad, go up and find out what's wrong. Well, I didn't get up there, but when it went, I didn't make it up the steps when it went. And you couldn't, because of the fire, you couldn't get in from the west side. So I ran around to the east because y'all might know Marilyn Wilson.
Yes.
Marilyn Wilson and John McCain were my 2 operators that were up there working, to do anything. And when I ran around to the back side, the flames were pretty good. The only thing I could see by the expander was a pile of stuff, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's Marilyn and John. It scared me to death. It was bad. But anyway, I was able to get close enough so it was all the insulation and the top of the expander then was what it was. It wasn't Marilyn Wilson.
The electric shop said, well, Charlie Canes at it again.
Yeah, Charlie Canes.
Raise the cane.
Okay.
We all
That's about all.
gonna have to tell our Charlie Kane stories.
I'd rather not. I love Charlie Canes, but he was a wild man.
What was your name again?
He was very smart and a very good supervisor, but he
What was your name?
Powers,
Howard.
Richard
Okay,
Powers.
thank you.
Richard, were you involved in the burning ground?
Yes, I was.
Yeah.
I was a supervisor of the burning ground, and that's why the Army trained me to be an unexploded ordnance. So I wasn't authorized to dispose of Army propellant without having a license. So they shipped me back for a couple weeks schooling at Indiana Army Ammunition Plant, and then on the hands training, getting rid of explosives. Actually, it was landmines, bombs, hand grenades, everything back at Savannah Military Depot. So I got my license and I came back. And that's the reason I stayed for 56 years out there, is because I was the only unexploded ordnance officer from 1970 clear up to 2000 and I think it was about 2006, something like that. And then they started bringing more in because that's when we're cleaning up the entire area.
Good. Well, that's what my family moved to Kill Creek Road in 1950. And I remember the burning ground, they were like the Northern Lights, except they were west of us.
Oh, yeah, it would light up everything.
Light up the sky.
At night. At night. Later years when we didn't have that much, but in the Vietnam and the Korean and world, they burned mostly at night, but we burned during the day then. Later on, and when it was a pilot, you were just doing the prove out of the new powder things. We burned during the day. We didn't do it at night.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else?
Then I got a quick joke.
Okay.
Refers to the ordnance plant. When the plant was under construction, they hired all kinds of people, and practically everything was made out of wood, and so a lot of them became carpenters, but they weren't necessarily that smart in their carpenter work to begin with. So the story goes that there was these two guys working on opposite sides of this wooden building. And one of them would reach in his pocket, pull out a nail, look at it, and threw half of them away. And his buddy seen what he was doing. He said, "Why are you throwing those nails away?" He said, "Well, the heads are on the wrong end." And he said, "Well, stupid, they're for the other side of the building."
Did you ever find that board stretcher?
If there's no one else, I think we'll probably have to call the meeting adjourned. Yes.
I could add a few more things.
Okay.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. Well, after the plant closed down from World War II, I worked out there and drove a truck. They hauled grain into the magazine area. They cleaned out the magazine area buildings, and we hauled grain out there. But Robert's Rodeo had some livestock out there. They had buck and broncs, Brahma bulls, and so you had to watch out, look both ways, kind of pause a little bit, go from one building over to the other. And then the Korean War broke out, and I hauled grain back out. So it was quite a exchange. I also tarred roofs out there, so the grain wouldn't get wet. And I say, well, Okay, after everything was said and done, DeSoto started taking care of the water plant in the building 132, which is well water. Well waters, part of it was run through the water softeners for the power plants. But that part didn't face DeSoto, they were in the other part of it. And they worked there for quite some little while. So I thought I might add that, but I think that's about it.
What was the river intake? Somehow I had the idea, which must be mistaken, because I do make a mistake every once in a while. But I thought that river intake was where they took water, even though it had some sediments in it. It didn't have the dissolved limestone in it that made it difficult. So that story is false, I guess. Or you can tell me.
Well, we had traveling belts, which were probably 20 foot long, and each section was about yay big. And they'd go down into the water and come back up, and they had a spray system that would wash all the trash out, you know, cans and tree trunks and so forth. Went right back into a trough, right back into the water, river. But after everything was said and done, well, I guess that's about it.
I got a question for you, Bob.
Yes.
I'd love to, maybe I'm wrong about one thing, but they used river water in production and what stuff, and all the well water was for the drinking fountains and all that stuff.
Well, I think the water fountains were river water, I believe.
Well, see, one time during standby, we strung lights, and they have an underground water facility with it feeds those big front 4 tanks.
Mhm.
They told us it held 12 million gallons of water. Because we strung, they actually took little skid loaders down there and cleared out mud and stuff that had been accumulated from World War I in Korea. This was during Vietnam. And they stored 12 million gallons of water there that they pumped up to the tanks. And that's what they used instead of river water for our drinking water and all that is what I was told. And in the magazine area, didn't they haul a lot of stuff in there? Burkhardt?
We hauled a lot of old black powder out of there.
Okay. And on the water, that's what we were told. We did string lights, and they told us it was like 40 acres under there. It's concrete. I'm sure it's still there because it's underground.
Well, they did have a 12 million gallon reservoir for the river intake. After it was treated at the filtration plant, it was pumped over to the reservoir, and it was a little bit above the top of the reservoir was a little above ground, and they actually could play softball on there if there weren't too many big hitters. But they had big diesel pumps if there was a power failure, and each piston had 6 cylinders. Each piston was 13 inches across, and they started with air pressure because electricity was off. So we had a little air pump there, you know, that put it up into a tank, and electricity was off. They'd kick that diesel on. Man, that thing would pump the water.
The inside electricians had to go by every week and make sure that emergency diesel thing would work. I know that other electrician who was here
Yeah.
inside, that was part of their job. Didn't you do that?
Yep, Mike and I used to go down there.
Yep.
And if they had a fire or anything like that, they'd call the 12 million gallon reservoir and say, kick the diesels in. They overflooded the towers many a time. They would really pump the water.
We had part of the switch house blow up one time, and we had to take it out of service, and we ran those diesel generators over at the Army place and backfed to feed. This was during standby, so they weren't doing any production. And we backfed the buildings to get their electricity. We had to do that for probably about 6 months or so till everything was built back.
But since you work in the water department, it'd be interesting to know, that's the only operating building out there on that entire 9,000 acres is Building 132. The Army leased, donated, sold, I don't know what, to the city of DeSoto. And that's still the city of DeSoto's water plant. It's Building 132. Now, they didn't tear the old one down, but they put a new, beautiful metal building around the old Building 132. But it's still operating after all of these years, serving the whole city of DeSoto.
My son-in-law works there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the water softener, they're in big cypress tanks instead of concrete. And when first started moving up, they leaked like a sieve until that cypress expanded and they're watertight. It was quite a place. And then we also had a waste acid plant because the Kill Creek, it would dump into the Kill Creek, but it was water from the, I guess, nitrators or whatever. I'm not sure about that part. But they had an excess of acid in the water. We had a lot of stuff out there. Yes.
I didn't come there till '74, and I'm a little light on my memory about reading stuff about the history of the water system. But was actually the river water system initially separate from the well water system?
Oh, yeah.
And the primary purpose of the original river water system was for the fire protection?
Oh, no.
No?
No.
No, that wasn't right? I thought it was
Not just for fire protection, no.
Hmm?
It was used, I think, well, I'm not sure where all it was used.
I think it was production all through the place, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was all production. It supplied all the cooling to the South Acid area when I was working there in the, so yeah, that's river water. And of course, it's defunct now, as they don't do any pumping up that 1 million reservoir, all those diesel engines, everything are gone from there. And in fact, they had one person that fell into the river intake. Now, I never was down there, but he fell into it. This was been 10 years ago, and he was, they had to, get him out, the fire department. I guess he had someone with him. They weren't working, they're just kids exploring. But he was pretty bad shape. I don't know how far he fell, but I think it's quite a ways.
I bet, yeah. Well, we had, you talking about kids and so forth being where they shouldn't be. When the river was real low, you could see these great big humongous catfish going up the river. And the river would be so low at times, some guy come wading across there, And here he was at the river intake building, didn't know how I got there. He wasn't supposed to be there. But there he was. Anything else?
Wasn't river intake all the non-potable water on the plant, and then 132 was
Yeah,
potable water?
that's the way I
That's where
understand.
a lot of the wells went to.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure about Sunflower Village though. I thought that was on river intake water that was treated at the filtration plant, which was nearby.
Yeah, I grew up in Sunflower like you, we had ice boxes, but I don't know where the water came from.
Yeah. Well, I'll deliver some ice to you maybe.
Probably so, because I lived there since I was 3 years old till I was a senior in high school.
Well, like I said, I don't think anyone had a refrigerator there, much of what you read or hear elsewhere.
Well, not until the Korean War and stuff.
Probably right, yeah.
Because they took, when the coal bins left,
Yeah.
then they brought in, we had little gas stoves.
Yeah. Yes, Darrell?
I read somewhere that the old original concrete block buildings, that there weren't any doors on the kitchen cabinets. They were just open, so you could see
I think you're right. We did have showers.
Yeah.
We had a small kitchen stove, 4-burner, and it had an oven, of course. I don't know if you'd bake a big turkey in there or not. It was quite a place. They had start at the next to the 103rd Street, where the church is now. They had a theater, a fine restaurant, a bowling alley, and it was just a good, fun place.
Well, I set pins there at that bowling alley. You set pins and they'd come take you out. If they weren't busy, they'd let you go to the movie for free. That's how us teenagers at Sunbar made money.
Oh, yeah.
The story I heard about the bowling alley was a friend of mine. He was very religious, so it's got to be true. That Wilt Chamberlain, the basketball player, that he got a job there setting pins. But when the basketball coaches at KU found out what he was doing, they said, "You can't do that. Well, bowling balls will hit your ankle and break it." So he lost his job.
Might be. Anything else?
Well, how many people live down in Sunflower Village at its peak? Do you have any idea?
I tried to count how many buildings were there. I think there was 800 buildings in the old village. And sometimes there'd be 2 in one small apartment at the end of it. We had small 4 apartments in one building, and then 6 in another building, and it kind of alternated. We had telephone booths about every 3 or 4 lanes. We didn't have any private lines. The drugstore, I think it was the Walgreens drugstore we had, and we had payphones up there, and the ones in the village were payphones also. But of course, they were a nickel. It only cost a nickel.
When I was in grade school, we had 70 go out for basketball.
70 what?
70 boys went out to make the basketball team.
Oh, yeah.
Because we played Lawrence Junior High when I was in grade school. Beat them every time. And they didn't have a bad team because John Hadel was on their team. We had some real good athletes at Sunflower. There was nothing else to do, either that or fight. That was what Sunflower was known for. Good athletes and being rough. But somebody from Lawrence or Olathe that would come out during the Korean War and make comments or pick at the girls, as the old saying goes, we'd kick their butts and send them home.
Well, I lived there till Uncle Sam sent me a notice, and he even used my middle name, so I knew I was in trouble. Got drafted. Your friends and neighbors have selected you. I used to like those people. Okay. I think I probably said enough. Maybe 2 minutes.
I'm curious how many people would be interested in buying one of these T-shirts with the watercolors.
Do you sell them in DeSoto? Where do you have them at?
They're not manufactured yet. They're made
Okay.
in Olathe.
Gotcha. Can somebody get with the DeSoto Museum if they're interested, or who would they get with?
Probably me.
Okay. If anybody's interested in a shirt, just get with this gentleman afterwards. Do we have anybody else that wants to present? All right. I think we'll adjourn the meeting for the evening. Hope to see you guys in September for our meeting about the local areas in Eudora. So, all right. Thank you guys. Meeting adjourned.